Shai, it's such a pleasure to be doing this with you. For those that are watching, Shai and I met 2 years ago now when we were both at the height of our TSW journey. It's a privilege to finally sit down with her and have this conversation. And thanks for taking the time to do this. We've not just watched each other and helped each other through this journey, but we've become dear friends through it. And we also come from the same religious community, so there's a lot of uh, camaraderie with that, as well as we both share our story really openly with the people that watch us. So Shai, thanks for doing this and welcome. So Shai, for everybody that's watching, can you share your eczema topical steroid withdrawal journey and story, please?
Yeah, so in my case, I have grown up with eczema, or eczema as I would call it. I had a very, very, very mild case of eczema when I was growing up. I had the typical case where I would have it behind my knees, in my elbow creases, and then sometimes on my upper lip, but nothing major. I was prescribed hydrocortisone cream, a very sort of class 7 low level potency at the age of 2. So that's the earliest sort of findings from my medical history. But I do know that I used it very sparingly. I didn't need to rely on it at all. In my case, what had actually happened was my eczema was very much under control, even though I had sporadically used hydrocortisone here and there. And it was actually dormant for about 7 years before I had an allergic reaction in 2020.
Okay.
So I was visiting Canada, contemplating living there, and was testing out being there for 6 months. The accommodation that my husband and I were in at the time turned out to be completely unsuitable for me and allergies that I didn't know I had. So apparently I have a very severe dust mite allergy, and I didn't know this at the time, and so my face puffed up, had terrible allergic reaction, and as a result of that was straight away put on prednisone. And once the prednisone sort of wore away after a 6-day course, I was then put on a 10-day course right off the back of that, along with Elicon, elidel, and Protopic. So as we both know, Elicon is a pretty strong steroid cream. I can't remember if it falls within class 2 or 3, but then also elidel and Protopic, which are immunos and are not great for our skin either. They probably do just as much damage, if not worse, than the steroids. So I was using these 3 creams for, I would say, 5 months before I started noticing some pretty significant symptoms. And again, I was using them sparingly. I was using them as per doctor's instructions. I wasn't lathering them on. I was actually maybe using them once a day after my shower. And yeah, after the 5 months, I started noticing that I was developing sort of red patches, particularly on my cheeks. But the biggest thing for me was the fact that my showers started to sting. And I think that early on, that was the Protopic. And I was told by pharmacists and doctors that Protopic is supposed to sting when you put it on, which is a massive red flag for me. But yeah, over time, the symptoms just got worse and worse. But yeah, in terms of steroid use and why I use them, that's pretty much it.
And why did you ultimately stop?
So in my case, what was happening was during that time that I was noticing these worsening symptoms, I was seeking medical advice in every which way I could. And I think I probably went to about 5 different dermatologists. And it got to a point where I was being gaslit so badly that I was walking out of doctor's appointments and bursting into tears because I just felt so misunderstood. I was told that I was going through severe eczema or worsening eczema. And I knew in my gut that that just didn't feel right. Something more was happening and there needed to be a better solution.
So let's jump ahead. You or maybe briefly tell us what your worst symptom was before you arrived in Bangkok and started CAP.
So for me, it was definitely that hot burning sensation. The symptoms that come particularly at night, so feeling like you cannot have even skin to skin contact, not just with someone else, but even with yourself. And so like having to sleep with like a sheet between my legs and between my arms, and just feeling this constant burning heat. For me, I had nerve pain, I had zingers, I had a lot of insomnia, a lot of hair loss. Um, I had some oozing here and there, but for me, it wasn't too severe.
So you get to Bangkok and you go for your first induction with Jay. What did you learn about your case in that induction? And can you talk to us about the amount of steroids you used and how that would impact your journey?
Yeah, so in my case, getting to the clinic felt pretty surreal. It was amazing to get there and finally meet Jay, who I'd heard so much about. And my first consultation with him was 3.5 hours long. And I think it's important to note that Jay doesn't charge for those consultations, by the way. He's giving his own time, and he really goes through in so much depth everything, like every stage of TSW, what TSW is, how does it affect our skin, what are the side effects that we might face as a result of going through TSW and trying different modalities like NMT. So in my case, it was getting to the clinic, understanding that where I was at was I was dealing with a fungal infection, which I had no idea I had because it's quite difficult to spot in TSW. I was also, in hindsight, potentially dealing with an underlying bacterial infection that wasn't really showing up on the skin yet. But when I look back at pictures and back at like accounts of how I was feeling at the time, I think that there could have been underlying bacterial infection. They're very mild, very under control. And in terms of my steroid use, so Jay takes us through this process of helping us understand how much steroid we've used in grams and the potency, etc. In my case, I had used in total in my lifetime no more than, we would say, 400 grams. And that's being generous because I never had the need to go back to a doctor and say, I need a new tube of this. And in my case, a lot of that, I would say maybe half of that 400 grams was the low potency hydrocortisone. And then the other 200 grams was Elicon.
Can you describe what is happening to your skin as you're going through using CAP to heal after all the various 3 different steroids you've used?
Yeah, I mean, as you know very well, my journey here has been a pretty complicated one. I came here thinking that my case would be pretty textbook because of my steroid usage and just the state that I was in when I got here. I wasn't severe. I was very uncomfortable in my skin, but I wasn't oozing or anything like that anymore. Uh, and so it was meant to be, on paper, a pretty straightforward journey for me. 12 to 15 sessions probably would have been enough. But in my case, like I say, in hindsight, putting all the pieces together, I believe that I did have an underlying bacterial infection, which was not visible, which I could probably feel a little bit under the skin. And 2 weeks after being here in Bangkok, the clinic actually took a break because they worked through Christmas and New Year's. So during that time, my husband and I decided to go to the beach and enjoy some sun and sea. It's really important to mention at this point that sun and sea is great for our skin, particularly when we have fungal infections. But it's important to know when it's your time, like when your skin is strong enough to be able to handle going into the ocean. And in my case, we thought because of the stage that I'm in TSW that my skin was okay to handle it. And because I hadn't sort of had conversations about this with other cappers and all the rest of it, I went into the ocean, had a great time, knew that from other cappers, that experience is going to be the first 20 minutes of being in the ocean. You're going to sting and you're going to feel itchy and all the rest of it. I didn't realize how bad it would be for me. And I got extremely itchy. And was itching all over, and thought that, okay, this is just part of it. And I continued to do the swimming on a daily basis for about 3 or 4 days. Obviously, my itching led to open wounds, and I ended up with an infection.
Describe the feeling of a bacterial infection.
An infection makes you very itchy on top of the TSW itch. So it's extremely itchy. It compromises your skin to the point that your skin very easily breaks. I mean, I know that already happens with TSW, but it takes it a step further. And there is this sensation, for me at least, where there's this constant tingling right under the very surface of the skin. And I think the way that I described it to you when I was going through it was, it feels like you have a very thin layer of skin, and right below that, you have wetness. It felt like I
Weeping.
would be weeping at any moment. And that was the case. If I itched even a little bit, I would instantly start weeping. Part of this discomfort, or the majority of the discomfort that I'm feeling right now, particularly in my face, is due to the fact that I have an infection, which just kept festering and over time got worse, and was just brutal to go through. But in hindsight, what I know now, having done an allergy test a couple of months ago, is I learned about that dust mite allergy. And I spoke to a doctor about this, and a regular allergy test, when someone comes back with a high allergy test, they expect an IgE of like 200. Mine came back at 3,800.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So my body was inflamed and fighting. And so, because it was constantly fighting, it couldn't heal. And so, yeah, we were finding that my CAP treatments were definitely giving me relief, definitely helping me. I was extremely sensitive the 2 days after CAP. And we were seeing some progress over time, but it just was not. I mean, I don't mean to compare, but in this particular case, it just was not what it was supposed to look like. Yeah.
That's a really great example, and I hope that people can see that how much the safe space piece really matters
Yeah.
to creating conditions of success, right? The device is 50% of the work.
100%.
You have to do the other 50%.
Yeah. So, I mean, having gone through infection for a pretty prolonged period, I think that the infection on my face lasted at least 4 months. Um, in my case, I had to use a lot of trial and error. Of course, we are taught how to take care of our infections. So I was administering saline technique every day, twice a day. And essentially, what that is you clean your skin with saline wherever you're infected, but then you also go a step further and soak that area with saline for about 5 minutes in order to minimize the bacterial growth. Of course, having gone through an infection, I was put on antibiotics. Again, seek medical advice. Um, I A big tip for me is that if you're going to be put on a topical antibiotic, check the ingredients. I preferred using Fusidin because I patch tested it. That's the other thing. Patch test anything that you're going to be using topically. Uh, we're finding that with antibiotic creams, one will suit others more than another, and you just have to find what works for you. And Fusidin, in my case, which works pretty well for me topically, use it sparingly. But again, be careful that you're not purchasing something like Fusidin H, which has steroid in it. Um, Throughout my journey with this infection and trying to understand how to better deal with it and heal it, I actually decided to take the plunge with Dead Sea Salt about a month ago. And so, what I do is on a daily basis, I will do sort of just a facial plunge for about 1 to 2 minutes in a very, very mild Dead Sea Salt solution. You don't want to be doing anything in a strong solution because that just makes us itchier and causes more damage and irritation. And so, they do say that in order for you to see the results of Dead Sea Salt, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks. And I think that's bang on. Like,
It's working really
my
well.
skin right now it's far from perfect, but I am not in pain. I am not in discomfort. We're sitting in a coffee shop here, and I'm sitting on,
I know.
a chair where there's likely dust mites. I mean, let's be honest. But I'm comfortable in my skin.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Maybe just share with us some tricks that you've, shared with your family to make sure that everything is a-okay when you get there and you're comfortable.
Yeah, so my case is a little bit unique because I actually live in Canada right now, but traveling to the UK to continue CAP treatment there at the UK clinic for another month or two. The UK feels like home for me, so I'm excited for that. But leading up to that, I know that my family is going to be there for about 2 weeks. And so, actually, in the lead up to this, I've been sending messages and getting them to prepare for my arrival and kind of mentally preparing them as well to understand, and they get it, but I think at a really deep level I have to explain in a lot of detail exactly what I need. And so, that for me meant sending them a document yesterday which very simply explained, I think I had outlined three different categories. The first was like cleaning the home. The second was laundry and handling laundry, and how to clean my sheets and towels and all the rest of it. And the third was more general tips about maintenance and ensuring that if someone is coming to clean the air vents or whatever it might be, it needs to be done with just water. Um, but coming down to the really granular stuff that when we're going through our day-to-day lives without TSW, we completely are oblivious to. So, for example, the toilet bowl fresheners that you get to hang over the toilet bowl, reminding them to take those out. Reminding them that even if there's incense sticks we have some in one of our lower drawers, and I noticed them last time, telling my mom to get rid of those because even though they're in a drawer, when I'm in that area, I can smell them and I get itchy. And so it's really thinking right down to like thinking outside of the box, some of the things that we have to do. It's a lot, but it makes it all worth it when you get used to doing those things for yourself and getting into that routine, like traveling with our sheets, traveling with an air purifier.
The goal is just creating the space, your skin will get stronger,
Yeah.
and then you won't have to be doing all these crazy things.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
closing remarks. Anything you want to share? Anyone you want to say something to?
So I think coming to Thailand for me has been healing in so many ways. Um, like we said, CAP treatment is amazing. It's only 50% of the work. The education that we get here it's unmatched. To be able to work with someone who has treated this condition for almost 20 years now and has collected a lot of data. It's been a real privilege to learn from Jay. So, I mean, hats off to Jay, really, and his team. That clinic would not be what it is without him and his team. Um, and the community here, I feel like being a part of this community, coming to a space where I just felt so seen, so heard, so understood for what I was going through. I learned to rest here. I learned to not feel guilty about just resting and understanding the role that that plays in my healing. And yeah, the part that I really want to take forward is the mental health side of things. I think, as we go through TSW, we are in fight or flight for a lot of it because of everything that we're going through and everything that we experience physically. Uh, a lot of the time, the things that we're going through emotionally and mentally, we don't have time to process that as we're going through all the physical stuff. And I think coming here, it's like I gave the reins over to someone and it meant that I could relax to a certain extent, which in some ways was scary because all the emotion hit me at that point. And it made me realize that, there's a real space here that we need to work on to ensure that we're dealing with our emotions and whatever comes up with TSW mentally for us, psychologically for us, to be able to work through that in a really healthy way so that we can live our lives in a way that is meaningful and that, we're not dealing with PTSD because that's a real thing. In whatever way I can hopefully give back to this community, I will.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shai.
Thank you.
I
Aya.
appreciate it.
Take care.